Hello, everybody. I'm Martin Loggers. I'm Chief Technology of Supply Chain Media. You also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of the quarterly Supply Chain Movement and the website. So we have an exciting webinar coming up, a very interactive one, and I'm looking forward to it. So next to me is Sean Cooley. You see me on the left side. That's me. And with me, I have Sean. Sean, hi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Martin.
All right. So, well, Sean is the author of quite thick book called Transition Point. He will talk about it later on, quite extensively. This webinar will be recorded, but everybody's on mute. But you can ask questions. So basically, you will see on the right-hand side a questions panel where you can ask questions. So basically, we have a Q&A at the end, but you can ask questions during the webinar, during the conversation. So basically, if the questions are in line with what we are talking about, I try to ask this questions immediately. And you will get the PDF afterwards within 48 hours, so you don't have to take pictures of all the screens. Anyway, so we're going to talk about innovating into the future. And basically, a lot of companies are struggling with what to do. And first, I want to introduce a survey McKinsey did 10 years ago. And basically, only 1 out of 3 companies do have a competitive strategies. So 2 out of 3, they stand a chance, you might say. But more worrisome is that only 20% of the companies link their business strategy to the supply chain. So 80% of the companies have a disconnect between business strategy and their supply chain. And I think it's getting even worse because supply chain is getting more complexer, business getting more complexer, and we'll discuss it later on. Another thing is that only 75% of successful 70% of the employees within successful companies they know how they contribute to the strategy and the success of the company. So 25% of the employees don't know what they're doing within successful companies. And within lesser successful companies, it's even 60%. So, there's a lot of fog within companies and the direction they're going to. And basically, and it's in the middle of the saying, the most effective companies are doing scenario planning. They're looking far ahead, and they look at macro trends, and they build their business on that and their supply chains. And the last part is communication with a clear story. So how do you know? How do you explain to your employee, to your colleagues, and to your business partners what you're doing? So visualization is an interesting and powerful concept. And based on that, we created a model called the mind map model. And basically, there are 4 segments. On the upper left side, you have the market trends to start with. And then you go to the second quadrant, you have the impact on the company. That's more internal. Talk about it later. And then on the third quadrant, you have your supply chain challenges, and now and in the future. And in the fourth quadrant, you look at supply chain solutions, and based on that, you connect it with the market trends, and you go full circle. So basically, that's a model we have developed, and we have applied it with a lot of companies, and we do a lot of work on that. And the first part of this segment is the trends. You have demographic trends, economic, sociological, technological trends, ecological trends, and political trends. We'll talk about a lot of about the technological trends. And we'll use this model to explain what's happening in the world and how you should respond on that. All right, but Sean, from a long view perspective over time, so what's happening in the world right now?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, obviously everyone's fixated right now around the COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 and the sort of level of disruption that's been risen because of that. But actually, since the financial crash, it's been really disruptive anyway. We've been in a sort of state of flux, and I've always been really fascinated about why is change so both so rapid and so disruptive right now, when it didn't seem to feel that way, certainly in the 80s and 90s. There was, there was change, but it didn't feel anything like it did now. And further research in my book realized that, one of the major reasons is, our progress, especially our technological driven progress, and all of the trends that you mentioned there, Martin, are all connected. It's cyclical, not linear. The progress comes in waves. It's not a straight line. And it's driven by the innovator, effectively, by the entrepreneur, and innovation specifically around three key areas: new power sources, new transportation mechanisms, and new communication mechanisms. And they create these waves of change called Kondriav waves. And the financial crash of 2008 effectively represented the end of the fifth wave. And we've been in a kind of transition phase for the last sort of decade, really, where we had this sort of the old industries of the fifth wave still fully in existence, and also the emergence of the sixth. But it was really looking for investment to move away from the sort of the old ways of working and move into the new ways. So there'd been a lull for a long period of time around things like artificial intelligence and robotics, but now money has really started to find its way, and the coronavirus pandemic has simply been rocket fuel to this transition. It's really sort of forced the money to start to move into these new business models and new automations that were ultimately in incubation for quite some time. And the interesting thing is that you move to the next slide, you can see that we're really only at the start of this. So the wave structure has two halves to it. The first half is driven by behaviors that are very much innovative in nature and are based around experimentation and entrepreneurship. And then the back end of the wave, and you have to bear in mind these waves are around 40, 50 years long, which is why every time people experience it, they think it's a new trend, because it's the first time they've ever experienced it in their lifetime. The back end of the wave, the downswing, is effectively all around efficiencies and exploitation. So if you imagine the sort of behaviors that were predominant in the business world in the downswing period, it was all around cost control, and lean was a big thing. It was about quarterly short-term returns. It was about profit maximization, and actually there wasn't a lot of investment flying into businesses, into new innovations. Investment was going into money. It was going into financial products. It was trying to find an easier way to get return than through sort of the hard business of physical things. So we've been in this, we've seen these waves before, and we've been in a downswing for a long time. But for the last decade, we've really been transitioning. But we're fully in the sixth wave. We're fully in the most disruptive period of these wave cycles. And the interesting thing, if you go on to the next slide, you see is that actually these waves are disrupting, they're accelerating the creative disruption impact. So as you can see here, we're looking at a graph of the sort of anticipated lifetime of an organization on the Standard & Poor's 500. You can see that that's really dropped, and each wave is sort of causing an impact on the sort of life cycle of a business. And in fact, the prediction is by about 2025 that a company would only spend about 14 years on the S&P 500, compared to, at the start of the sort of 20th century, when some companies have been there, for a very long time.
So where are those companies going? Are they going bankrupt, or are they acquired, or are they, just get out of the S&P 500?
Yeah, so it's a combination. I think if their business is wedded to the old ways of doing things, then they're dropping off, and they're either getting falling apart, splitting up, getting broken apart, or or they're effectively just falling off the list. They're not necessarily completely collapsing, but the business model they were attached to is no longer there. I mean, you have some poster child organizations, companies like Kodak, for example, that just stayed too long wedded to old technology, in that case film, rather than embrace the new technology, digital, which ironically they themselves had invented. But they were so wedded to the profit margins they were getting from film that they just simply didn't move quick enough to the new ways of working. And then you have other businesses like like in the whole sort of Blockbuster Netflix model, where organizations like Blockbuster, who was the de facto go-to place to rent a video, lost sight of the fact that actually people didn't really want to go to physical stores, and didn't really like the idea of running every Sunday night to try and get a video back before you got late charges. and actually really what they just wanted to do was watch a movie. So at the moment someone came up with a better option, they ultimately were replaced.
What is leading to this creative destruction?
Well, it's like I say, it's a long-term trend. This wave's really interesting. There's the forces that are driving this wave. I mean, it's all technologically driven. Most of these waves are innovation-driven, technologically driven. This wave is driven by what I call the 6 waves creative disruption triple whammy. And there's 3 major different areas here that are all sort of converging together. The first one is basically the replication of all the things that your physical hands would do with machines. So it's across the end-to-end supply chain. All, physical tasks that we used to think were uniquely human and would be incredibly difficult to be automated are now being automated. And that ranges from everything from picking soft, fragile fruits out of the ground, such as strawberries, through to incredibly complex things like driving, for example. They're all effectively being automated. Warehouses, for example, the warehouse avoided any real degree of automation for a very long time. Always needed human hands to pick, pack, put away, load, drive. All of that area now is being completely automated by things like ASRS systems and the systems like KeeperBots that Amazon utilizes. The thing that's made them able to do that has been whammy number 2, which has been the automation of cerebral activities, the white collar work. So here's where it gets a bit messy, because most people think that automation is something that happens to other people and not me. And now what we're finding is a lot of the sort of middle class professions are now at risk from artificial intelligence systems, chatbots, those sorts of things, RPA processes, all these back office activities that we used to sit in offices for are now being able to be done by automation. And then whammy number 3 is effectively those machine brains controlling the machine hands. So as we move into 5G and sensors get put everywhere and we reduce the latency of communication, then we're going to find that we have real-time sense and respond capabilities to not only track what's going on but actually influence it. So you've got AI control towers driving robotic systems, and also from everything from autonomous vehicles. And the real kicker is that all 3 of these are happening right at the same time.
And what is the impact of COVID-19?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 really, and I wrote about this very early doors, specifically for things like the e-commerce revolution. It's rocket fuel. It is actually providing, that little virus is providing rocket fuel. So if you think, for example, about the norms of human society that have been altered, you can imagine there would be quite a period of time where certain laggards in society would, especially senior members, would take some time to move away from things like physical currency. We don't trust digital currency. We like to hold money in our hands. Now suddenly the last thing anyone wants to do is to hold a physical piece of currency in their hands, because they don't know who's touched it beforehand. They don't know what germs are on it. So you're seeing the sort of vast movement away from very long-standing traditional norms, everything from holding currency to shaking someone's hand to working in a packed office to going out into a restaurant. All these things are being disrupted, and new business models are having to be created really, really rapidly. And so the technology that was, in some cases in incubation states, or in other cases had started to materialize into the world, is suddenly being embraced, because people are looking for new ways to deliver goods and services that kind of minimizes the amount of human-to-human interaction in there. And things like this, this webinar here, I'd normally be stood on stage delivering this. We'd normally be in a packed room. These sort of telepresence, work from anywhere, has just been purely accelerated by COVID.
Yeah, and what we are seeing, so we did a workshop in a 3D environment with avatars in July with Givaudan, from people from all over the world. So they were actually walking around, seeing each other, sometimes for the first time ever, in a 3D environment, talking to each other, and even do post-it exercises in a 3D environment. So next to this kind of webinar, it goes beyond that. So let's talk about technology. So what kind of technology is applied right now?
Well, I think that, again, these are technologies that have all been talked about for some time, and they some of them are. The COVID is really sort of helping to move them to cross the chasm into the mainstream or to come out of the trough of disillusionment, as Gartner calls it. So, things like drones, for example. We've been talking about drones ever since Jeff Bezos went on 60 Minutes in the US and said he was going to deliver goods to people by drones, which everyone thought was a PR stunt. But the reality was it wasn't. But it took a long time to get things like FAA approval. that FAA approval has been, achieved in the last month in the United States, so that they can start to make these kinds of deliveries. Collaborative robots in companies like KUKA, for example, or Rethink Robotics. There's been a lot of organizations that have been looking at this as a way to save money, but now they're looking at it as also as a way to to localize their manufacturing, or to remove the amount of dependency on human people, but given that most humans aren't allowed to congregate in the same place anymore. Blockchain, again, it's in that sort of trough of disillusionment at the moment, but actually there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with companies like DP World, sort of looking at rolling out and piloting this. And once again it crosses the chasm into the mainstream, we'll see sort of widespread adoption. RPA has gone from something that few people talk about to something that a lot of organizations are trying their best to replicate, because again, with a workforce that's working remotely, they really want to see if they can sort of take all this repetitive rules-based work and just little bits of code do this for us. Chatbots enable you to have an ever-increasing level of intelligence in your sort of receptionist or customer queries capability that's available 24/7 for the cost of electricity. And then that brings us to things. How do we control this? How do we measure all of the data from all of these different systems and basically identify what's going on? And this is where companies like Era are making a lot of progress, and this sort of concept of cognitive computing, and other two companies like IBM working with Watson on their supply chain solutions. To be able to collect the data from all of these different machines across the end-to-end supply chain. Not just to basically be able to record it in a very descriptive manner, but actually to use it into a very prescriptive way, so it's actually able to tell us not only what's happening, but what we should do about what's happening.
Yeah. I thought today a short video about an Amazon Zeppelin with all kind of drones coming in and out of it. You can find it on LinkedIn and everywhere probably. So I don't know if it is real or not. It could be a computer generated images, or maybe it's a real Zeppelin.
The concept is real. Amazon's had a patent for a number of different things. That's just come off another webinar where I talked about that. The airship is something definitely has got a patent for. I think if I remember rightly, the actual video itself was some very smart CGI, but
yeah. But the seeing is believing, and based on that you can see, okay, how does it work and where does it work, etc. And
yes,
I will talk about blockchain later.
It's a precursor of where we're going, definitely.
Yeah. So how does the future value chain will look like?
Well, for a long time, I've been saying that, and I've written quite a few articles on this, and it's in my book as well, where I talk about, the future is, I call it a PAL value chain. So we're moving much more into personalization, the sort of days of mass manufacturing, mass marketing, the manufacturer, the retailer telling people what to buy, where to buy it from, when to buy it. Then that sort of paradigm shift has happened now, and it's really now about much more personalized products, services. And up until the coronavirus, definitely, we were moving into more experience-based sort of environments where it's not just good enough that you provide the service. I actually want to feel like there's a uniqueness to it, and it's much more of an experience. Automation across the end-to-end value chain, and that means organizations can start to really rethink the sort of cost to serve equation that says, maybe I can reduce long lead times, eliminate long lead times, reduce the need to buy things in bulk, and actually make them in smaller quantities using automation, and place it quite close to the consumer, and have micro logistics capabilities using these ASRAS systems. There's things that are looking at underground car parks, these sorts of things, in order to create urban warehouses. So we're localizing both production, retail, and also the logistics side of it. But automation is the key to that. It's what the things enabling that to happen. And if you think back, say, to the Rana Plaza disaster in 2013, when the sort of Western world woke up to the fact that everyone had embraced the concept of disposable fashion. A $10 t-shirt I can wear once and throw away. But then suddenly you realize that the cost of disposable fashion was disposable lives. And the damage that did to brands like Nike and to Primark and these sorts of organizations. A lot of companies now, I think, are able to say, well, we can take out not only a lot of our carbon footprint by manufacturing close to where the consumer is using automation, but we can also do away from the potential brand damage and the challenge of being able to make a unit cost using human labor, but not also, moving down the sort of exploitive route that a lot of companies are getting a lot of bad press for right now.
And because of COVID-19, a lot of manufacturing companies are looking at reshoring, not to be dependable too much on China, although China will remain a major player in the manufacturing world. So also COVID-19 has also accelerated to look at reshoring.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was a movement that was underway anyway, but I think what COVID did was, companies and countries really woke up to the fact that, we have, offshored our manufacturing. And in a lot of cases, but when you offshore your manufacturing, you also offshore your innovation. And that, and China had completely embraced that opportunity. If you're prepared to give us your manufacturing and allow us to start to re-engineer some of this, we're happy to do it for you. And I think the companies and countries woke up to the fact that when we needed our supply chains to act, it couldn't. We'd lost control of it. Either companies and countries went particularly nationalistic and said, well, I'm going to look after my own citizens first, so I'm going to redirect supply. And I think it woke a lot of people up. And I think now they're looking again and saying, the shorter the supply chain, the stronger the supply chain. Maybe we should start thinking again about the network and thinking again about how we strategically position our elements in our supply chain, and can automation enable us to do this and also retain the sort of cost advantages we had when we were buying in bulk from the Far East.
Yeah, and with the offshoring, a lot of companies were losing sight of their supply chains, because offshoring meant also outsourcing within that country, and then the tier 2, tier 3, and so forth on. You are losing visibility, and that's making your supply chain more at risk from damage of your brand to actual be unable to deliver.
Yeah, no, I'm right about that in transition point, because if you go back to everything from Hasbro, where they suddenly found they had lead paint on their toys once again, and they had to recall most of their range of sort of toys, through to the melanin issues in baby milk that kill loads of children in Argentina. And it was really this sort of wake-up call that says, you might know your supplier, and you might have traveled over to China and looked this guy in the eye and had a look around his plant and shook his hands. But did you know his supplier? And did you know his supplier's supplier? And there were some brown envelopes changing hands further down there, and some costs were being cut, and some corners were being cut. And hey, suddenly your brand's just been completely destroyed, because you didn't have visibility.
Another thing, with audits of your suppliers, there's the whole business in China where you can rent software and people to pretend. So if you get an audit, within a week, your company look fine, but it's all rented out, with the software and all this stuff. So there's a whole business around it to make sure the audited look fine, but in reality, they aren't.
Yeah. Well, there's a very famous case. I think there was some Apple stores that people worked in China that weren't actually Apple stores, but everyone who worked there thought they were working for Apple, and no one did. So they were completely, the whole thing was a complete, basically a copycat.
Yeah,
but the employees didn't even know. It was that, it was all fronted up.
So, but what is the catch of getting to a PAL value chain?
Well, I mean, this is what technology can do for us, but the reality is the organization capable of grasping the opportunity, really? Because whilst we're at an exponential period of change from a technological perspective, the one thing we found is that we don't, as humans, change that well. And that doesn't mean just us as individuals, but that means our organizational structures, it means as our political systems. So there's a gap between the potential of what we can do and the reality. And what we're seeing right now is organizations like Amazon, for example, or JD.com over in China, who are able to grasp that opportunity because they have complete control of their supply chain. They have complete vision of exactly who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And they can look at these technologies and go, right, this can help us to create a new value proposition over there, or this can remove barriers to customer value over here. And they can use it, experiment, roll it out incredibly quickly. Most other organizations, though, are paralyzed by their fifth wave behavior, their downswing behaviors. And what we're finding is that most leaders were trained in the downswing, not the upswing. So they were trained to, steady the ship, control costs, meet quarterly expectations. And their barriers to the opportunity of grabbing the potential is that, there's a an overarching fear of taking risks in the organization. If they innovate, they say, yeah, you can go away and experiment, but I need to see an immediate return on investment. Or you can experiment, but don't make a mistake. Well, how can you really embrace the opportunity when you're in that kind of culture? You're still locked into potentially these silo behaviors or one size fits all model. So there's lots of organizational barriers. But what we find is that most organizations, everyone's facing the same challenge, which is they're trying to control the present, they're trying to deliver on the present, they're trying to create a future, and they're trying to manage the transition all at the same time. But their organizational structures and their management styles, and even, in some cases, just simple things like, ego, is just holding them back. That we as a human race, we have an unfortunate ability to overvalue what we know and undervalue what we don't know. And I always quite like Mark Twain's quote that says that it isn't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. We hold on to information that isn't valid anymore.
So how can you close the gap? Because things are getting exponential, but how can you close this gap?
Yeah, well, I think there's when we talk about digital transformation, really most people think about technology, but we're not talking about technology. What we're talking about is a shift in the leadership mindset, and we need to move from being let more focus on just the immediacy and the tactical, and actually start to become much more strategic in our thinking. We need to really step back and understand who are our customers, what do they value, how do we deliver that value, through what channels do we deliver that value, how should our supply chain be set up to deliver that value. So we're strategically aligning things to a certain set of value propositions to a certain set of customers, which means we can't have a one size fits all, which means we have to be much more specialized and much more segmented and a lot less generic. Our demand plans are no good anymore. We find we're too slow, we're too inaccurate. We need to be more demand driven. We need to help machine insights, because we simply can't handle the volume of unstructured data that's being collected. We need to focus on being agile and resilient rather than just lean and low cost, because that's very much a downswing kind of behavior. And for the next 2 decades, we are going to be in the upswing. This is not something that's going to go away anytime soon. And we really need to be much more outside in and less inside in. So we need to be much more customer centric and much more firm centric, and just play to win rather than playing not to lose. If you just batten down the hatches and think we'll try and survive this, then you're probably going to struggle. You've really got to go into this as an opportunity rather than just look at it as a threat.
Yeah, and because of COVID-19, companies are realizing they have to be more resilient and agile.
Absolutely. Got to be on the front foot.
Yeah. So, but it also almost looked like COVID-19 is happening to a lot of companies, and then they have to decide to be resilient. But that's actually a bit too late.
Yes, and reacted. Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, John Cotter's 8 steps of change. His first one is create a sense of urgency. Create a burning platform, and I think certainly it's done that.
You're right. So basically, McKinsey said already 10 years ago, the secret of a more successful or really successful companies is scenario planning, looking into the future. So I kind of explain it a bit. Scenario planning is like this. We're living today, and then basically you go into the future, and you come up with all kinds of scenarios what can happen in the near future. It could be in a political arena, maybe Russia helping out Belarus, and that it can be some friction over there, or there will be a trade war happening, that kind of stuff. Or on a technological area, you could be in the nuclear science, you could get energy for free or whatever. These kind of scenarios you can come up with, so be divergent. And then next step is you create different kind of scenarios, not low, medium, high, that's bogus, but totally different scenarios, like a technical happy world, or a not so happy world where you're all being monitored, this kind of world you're describing also in the book, or a polluted world. So different kind of scenarios you can create. And I spoke to Mark Engel. He's now Chief Supply Chain Officer at Unilever, and I think probably 8 years ago he was CPO then of Unilever, and he had already created the scenarios of carbon taxation. So okay, what should Unilever do when carbon taxation is going to happen. A lot of companies don't have these scenarios all written out. What are the next steps if it will take place? And companies like Unilever are tracking down around the world, the governments, how far are we from this carbon taxation? And we're getting very close now. And a lot of companies don't even have these scenarios written down themselves. So you have to write down these scenarios and actually check down if it's going to happen in the near future or not. And then based on that, you will have these future scenarios, and you come to business and supply chain strategies. And then you have to have milestones and track down how things are developing in the world. And then you go to the execution phase. So this is what the companies are doing. And a lot of companies are also like Unilever, but also Frisch and Campina, they do business war games to actually play out the competition, how to be, how to kill your own company and create this kind of gaming environments to create these business scenarios for the future. And that's a good exercise. And even for people who are working for a company for 20 or 30 years, and if you ask them, how should you kill your own company? They know it. They get very creative, and then you get a lot of new insights in that. So basically, this is the first part of what we call in a quadrant of the mind map. So we have covered now the first quadrant, and you create your own scenarios and your trends based on what Sean and I have explained. And now we're going to move over to the impact of these trends on your company. Your business silo, finance, marketing, sales, supply chain, IT, HR, R&D, legal. So what has changed in your opinion, Sean, based on what you described earlier?
Well, I think that the biggest impact is there's been a sort of paradigm and power shift that's taken place in the upswing of the sixth wave. So we've moved from, being very much manufacturer and retailer centric to being much more consumer centric. The level of expectations have changed dramatically. We've moved from sort of purchasing assets into seeking access, and consumers now they don't want to necessarily invest heavily in things that are going to degrade rapidly or be replaced rapidly. So there's a more of an access mindset rather than asset mindset. And this means for an organization that we need to have a sort of a Copernican business revolution. We need to move away from the sort of heliocentric model of believing that our firm is everything that's important, and actually we just need to make stuff and sell it. And the job is all about persuasion of customers to buy our stuff, whatever that be, whether or not that be petroleum or or toy pandas, whatever it is we sell. But to actually really understanding who our customers are in each of their segments, what is it they're actually trying to do, this sort of Clayton Christian concept of sort of understanding their job to be done, really thinking about how we can solve their problems, and then therefore look at these new technologies and these new ways of working. So how can we position them in such a way that we actually solve our customers' problems and help them be successful, rather than just trying to sell them a product that ultimately might be redundant if the market changes, or if a new disruptive technology comes along and creates a new business model. So it's more about really recentering yourself around the customers and what they want, rather than around yourself and what you sell.
Yeah, a great comment from the audience. A quote from Jack Welch: if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of the change on the inside, the end is near.
Yeah, great quote. I like Jack Welch because it was quite interesting how he changed his entire perspective once he got out of industry. So when he worked for GE, it was all about shareholder value and managing expectations, and if you're not first or second in the market, get out. The moment he got out of industry and didn't have to sort of pander to analysts, he then started to say things like shareholder value were the dumbest idea in the world. So
and you see with GE, it used to be a conglomerate, but now, it's dissolving in separate entities. Like Philip has also dissolved in different companies because it was getting too big, and they couldn't handle it. They had different kind of customers, and, different kind of focuses within each division or business unit, and these kind of conglomerates are dissolving.
Yeah, exactly. The economies of scale aren't there, and actually your organizational structure becomes so non-conducive to change. You've got an oil tanker when you need speedboats.
Yeah. So, we have created a strategy compass, and basically, it all starts with the customer needs and buying behavior. And especially the buying behavior can change within one single customer. It can change overnight, or depending of his or her needs. So that's the first step, And the next step is, okay, then you have to choose the direction you are going to go. So, are you want to be a product leader based on an excellent product? Or do you want to have customer intimacy, the best solution for your customer, or you want to try for operational excellence, lowest costs? And basically, this is a model of Tracy and Wiersma. There are different strategic directions, and strategy is all making choices. And still, if you don't make these choices, if you say, I want to be all these companies at the same time, you're stretching yourself, And R&D thinking of product leadership. Operational excellence is residing in logistics, and marketing and sales are claiming customer intimacy. So then you are, stretching yourself, and and nobody knows which direction the company is going. So based on that, I have done a lot of research, and basically you can see all these logos of companies. Where are they at? Where is the DNA? Where they started out when they first were founded? You see all well-known names. So especially operational excellence is the world of Walmart, everyday low prices, but also IKEA is in that area. But you see some companies are moving away if they are very excellent in their first direction. So if you are an operational excellent company, okay, that's your focus, but you have to have a minimum threshold on the other two directions. And what Tracy and Wiersma are saying, if you are really good in one direction, you can try to add another one, but the third one is impossible. So basically, a product leader, Apple, good example, customer intimacy, Cisco, and Walmart is operational excellence, but you can't be Apple, Cisco, and Walmart at the same time. That's frankly impossible. And a lot of companies still trying to do that, and then people within the company don't know what is our direction. Do we want to be Apple, Cisco, or Walmart? And you have to make choices. And looking at Amazon, basically it started out of operational excellence. Jeff Bezos said in the late 90s, we are winning on the lowest pick in the warehouse per SKU. That was the CEO talking. That is typically something to say about operational excellence. And of course, later on, they added all kind of new flavors, and now with you can call out your orders with Alexa, and then it's more product leadership area. And you might claim that there is a bit of customer intimacy, but the products are still all the same. So basically, this is something you have to see. Okay, where are my what is my direction? What is my focus? And based on that, we said, okay, you have 6 supply chain types, from make to stock on the left to engineer to order. So basically, we have connected 6 supply chain types to the business strategy. And I've done a lot of workshops also with PepsiCo, and based on that, you saw some categories or divisions are in one supply chain and some in another. But the basic thing is that you should know that some categories are in one supply chain and some are in another. And if you can manage those different kind of supply chains, okay, that's all right. But you should know it, and everybody should know it. And it also means that you have to differentiate on your KPIs. So what I say, different supply chains mean different organizational structures, different processes and systems, and different behaviors and KPIs. So you see a lot of centralization on the left side and a lot of decentralization on the right side. And that's typically an organizational structure. And also process systems. It's unimaginable that you can do all the supply chains in one ERP system. It can't be. So because setting all the parameters and changing that over time is a headache, and nobody can. So also the process and systems need to be different. And that's why a lot of companies have different ERP instances, but you can't use all the same system for that. And maybe AI and systems like air technology can help out, but those are mostly boiled on. And also the behavior and the KPIs. When you are in customer intimacy, you have more leeway to decide what's necessary locally, whereas in operational excellence, it's all centralized, and within Walmart, you can't fly in all the computers, whatever. It has to be low cost. So the behaviors and KPIs are also different. And overall, you see in product leadership, different kind of overall KPIs, and everybody should know that within the company. So with an Apple environment, it's the net revenue per product, whereas in the customer intimacy world is the lifetime profit per individual customer. And it's totally different KPIs. And well, in operational excellence is the lowest end-to-end cost per stock keeping unit. So these are different kind of supply chains, and need also different approaches. And in the omnichannel world, it's getting more complicated because in some areas, this product in retail belong one supply chain, and in delivering at home, it is another kind of supply chain. So basically, you need to understand this, but it also implicates that business models are changing. Sean?
Yeah. So I think the really important point here is I think that structure should follow strategy, not strategy following structure. And I think that's a mistake that many organizations make, is that they try to create a strategy based around their existing structure. And it's I've seen that many years, even down to things like the strategies for ERP implementation is based around just making it do what we currently do, rather than thinking about how strategically how we should be utilizing this tool to deliver desired outcomes. And I think we've moved now from a world, actually, one of the big changes has been, we used to say products and companies compete. And 2001, Martin Christopher from Cranfield, where I work, he said, actually, I don't believe that's true. I think supply chains compete. I don't think that's true anymore. I think actually what we really, now in the upswing, business models compete. We're in a world of competing business models, of which the things that you mentioned earlier are certainly part of it. So we're really down to being looking at identifying your customer and what your customer values and what problems they have that you are in the game of trying to solve, creating a unique value proposition. This is your why. Why should they buy from? Why should that group of customers buy from you? And then having an aligned set of execution capabilities in order to deliver it, so it's a strategic line of sight from the activity all the way to the outcome. And then, of course, clarifications of the channels that customer would engage with you in order to buy that value proposition, from your demand channels through to your communication channels, your network, your supply chain network. So how do we deliver this? Which is all the points that you mentioned just then, setting up the right supply chain network in order to deliver the correct outcome, having the processes and metrics in order to support that. And then, of course, the processes themselves, the ways of working, the ways that we, use our execution capabilities to create that value proposition. And the glue that holds that all together is strategy. We have to have a strategy per business model, and we have to have, strategic business model teams that are focused on that customer segment, delivering our value proposition, from everything from the way we market it for the actual, the final point the customer gets to utilize the product, and then ensure that our execution capabilities are designed in such a way to deliver that value proposition to that defined customer segment. So it's all about, alignment and integration. But then when you look at technology and you look at new technologies, you're really saying, right, well, does it help us reach? How does it help this customer segment solve its problems? Or and how does it help us to create new value propositions? Does it help us create better ways of communication or capture demand better? Does it help us to make a more efficient way of working? So we're really looking at the technologies and saying, how does it help us to deliver this business model, or can it indeed, reinvent this business model? And I think that's a good example. That's a good question as well for organization. You mentioned it earlier when you talk about, how do we disrupt ourselves or make ourselves redundant? Some companies, the problem with, like I said, some companies only look at innovating within their business model, when in fact, we should be considering your possibility of, completely, innovating your business model, which is very difficult for companies to do, because you're basically saying the way we do business right now and the way that delivers profit right now, why don't we change it?
I get a question from the audience. Is this model similar to the one from Simon Sinek, Start with Why?
Was that a question to me or to the audience?
Yeah, that's you. Is it a similar model as the one from Simon Sinek?
The concept, certainly in the value proposition is, I mean, he used that as a marketing concept, and it's all about, you know, and certainly in the masterclasses that we're doing, you know, that's part of the parcel. You know, the first hearts, then minds. You know, people buy what you do, not buy why you do it, not what you do. I think that that's a nice soundbite, but the trouble with things like the Sinek's work and people like that is it's only part of the puzzle. You know, I like Michael Dell's comment that, you know, innovation is a commodity, but the execution of it isn't. Or you know, Edison's quote that, you know, innovation is 1% in, you know, inspiration, 99% perspiration. It has to be delivered. We have to actually deliver it. So you have to set up your structures, your models, your metrics, everything to deliver that value proposition. So I think the start of a why thing is a really good way to get you to think about, you know, your customers and why they should buy from you. But actually the next question is, well, how do we do that? So, you know, that's the, you know, that's got a strategy bit. What do we need to do? You know, who are we focusing on? There's some bigger questions there. And then when you look at technologies, the problem with most companies is they're dazzled by the lights. They see the technologies and they move towards it thinking this technology itself is a solution, when it, you know, it's a how or a what at best. But unless it's got a compelling why to attach itself to, then it's probably likely to be a distraction.
And personally, I think that Simon Sinek has missed an important question. That, you know, that's the who. You know, who do you want to serve, or where do you want to play, in which market you want to play, and is it in your existing market? So, you know, in our model, we have developed there's next to why, how, what, the who and the where in the same quadrant. And it's, you know, that's relating to the trends, the mega trends, the innovation drivers, the needs for customers. You get to a who and to a where to play. That's what the P&G, the former CEO for P&G said, is where to win. You know, and that's the first part. First is where to win, and then the why, how, what. And another thing about go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's interesting, you know, as an author, and as an author and someone who spends a lot of time trying to connect a lot of dots to make sense of multiple different moving parts, rather than just, you know, come up with one solution. What you find is that, you know, the books that seem to do well are those that present simple solutions to complicated problems. And I think there is a lot of value in brevity. You know, there is a lot of value in being in simplicity. But what we find, you know, in the same way as that, you know, most of these technologies are only one thing. They're only a partial element of a solution. So in the same way, a lot of these books are just a partial element of the solution. You know, they sell a concept and people get the concept and they love it, but how do you make it real? How do you do that? How do I deliver that in my organization? So I get the concept of something like, I don't know, start with why or built to last or whatever, but how do I actually physically do it? And I think that's where certainly the work that me and you are going to be doing on these masterclasses is designed to answer those questions.
Yeah. And one thing, there's a lot of confusion. What is strategy? A lot of companies are confusing strategy with ambition. You want to be number one in your market. That's not a strategy.
Yeah, it's correct. And I've got a section called, you know, good strategy, bad strategy, which, you know, in fact, the terminology I stole off Richard Rummelhoff. But yeah, you know, unless you can actually boil it down to action, and unless it actually has a defined outcome that you can align your personal contribution to, it's just an aspiration, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, serving 1 million people or 1 billion people or whatever, or save the world, you know, yeah, that's fine. That's an ambition, but it's not a strategy. Are you going to do that?
No, it's not. Most companies have that, don't they? They have the, we're going to be first or second in the market. We're going to grow shareholder value. Well, you know, double shareholder value, for example. You know, oh, fantastic. I'm not a shareholder. Why should I care?
You know, basically, the strategy is, you know, do you want to achieve that through product leadership, through customer intimacy, or through operational excellence? How do you climb that mountain? You know, which route are you going to take? You know, and a lot of companies haven't explicitly written down this for themselves, for their employees, and that's a you know, big part of the problem, I think. So how do we, you know, how do we get to the new supply chains? What should you do?
Well, in terms of getting to, you know, I always ask companies, you know, there are all these new technological developments out there, and they are wondrous and enables us to do things that we previously weren't able to do before. But before we run off into implementation mode, I think, you know, I say to most companies, you know, let's take a step back You know, and there's a quote here from my book that said, you know, if you had to rebuild your company today, you know, knowing how people use technology, how they behave, what they value, and what is technically possible, would it resemble the company that you currently work in? And in most cases, the answer to that is absolutely not. We would not design our business to look like this. So then the next challenge is says, well, okay, given that that's a fact, given that you know now what's potentially possible and you know what your customer values, then the challenge now you have is how do we change not just our, you know, technology, but our business models, our leadership styles, our mindset, and our modus operandi, so that it does look like a business that's going to be successful moving forwards. Because if we don't change, then a competitor is almost likely going to arrive that looks just like that and take away our business. And I think that's the challenge really, which says, you know, unless you can step back, define who your customers are, what they value, what it is that you can do for them that no one else can do, how you can align your execution capabilities to uniquely deliver that, and make it difficult for your competitors to replicate it. And then you can start to look at technologies and says, right, well, how does it help us to deliver that outcome? So we look at technology as a way of delivering a desired outcome to a specified group of customers, rather than just something to make us do what we've always done a little bit cheaper.
So there's a saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and someone from the audience said, you know, implementation eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. I think, you know, culture. This is one of the big things. It's the mindset of the organization has to shift. We have to move away from the command and control top-down structures. You know, they never really worked in the industrial age, but we kind of got away with it. It certainly doesn't work in the upswing of the digital age. You know, Jeff Bezos always, you know, has this sort of line that says, if you ever get a team that you can't feed with 2 pizzas, the team's too big. You know, so it's what he's onto there is that the moment management comes to play, once you start putting layers of management in, you slow everything down, because the managers manage, and what they end up doing is they end up actually, in a lot of cases, stopping the people from doing. So you sort of suck the entrepreneurial spirit out of the organization, and everyone manages a level too low. So you end up with directors managing, managers supervising, supervisors doing, and the doers just wait to be told what to do next. That is not a culture of an innovative entrepreneurial 6-way business.
I got a question from the audience. Is innovation for everyone? I mean, should we think everyone would go on the bus, or innovation implies some people need to leave from these initiatives?
I think, yeah, I mean, you know, Jim Collins wrote about this quite a bit, about, you know, first to get the right people on the bus in the right seats before you set off. And I think that's a very good point. And I think some people will find it difficult to change. I write about this at length in the book that talks about, you know, in the chapters that talk about people find, you know, change very scary. You know, there's a great little cartoon where it says, "Who likes change?" and everyone puts a hand up and says, right, who wants to change? And everyone puts their hands down. And then who wants to lead the change? And everyone runs out of the room. You know, so that's everyone likes the idea of it, but no one actually wants to do it, and certainly no one wants to lead it. So yeah, one of the challenges I think in many organizations is people who are just paralyzed by some very paradoxical fears. They're afraid of being left behind, and they're afraid of change, because change is new and it requires new skills and new knowledge that they potentially don't have. So they're caught in these 2 paradoxical fears: a fear of staying as they are and the fear of moving. And you're almost in this like quantum state, really, of sort of, you know, but it doesn't lead to great innovation, and it doesn't lead to a great future. And when you find a lot of people in organizations who've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of effort in getting things just as they like it, and you know, they've got their little empires built, and now we're saying, well, potentially we're going to disrupt all of that. We're going to change that now. We're going to be based around value chain teams, and we're going to have small, you know, speedboat like organizational structures. They're not up for that, because hang on a second, I've worked for 20 years building this empire that I've got around me, whether or not it's the procurement team or the, you know, the operations team or the warehouse, whatever it is, and I don't want to give it all up. So what you end up having in organizations is a lot of people who, you know, they end up being the architects of their own downfall by resisting changing to the sort of structures that they need to have in order to be successful.
Yeah, in successful organizations, you see that innovation is, on one hand, top down, you know, based on the strategy where you want to go, and then driving innovation projects. And on the other hand, it's also bottom up, you know, ideas coming from the floor, the operators, and pick all the brains, but in a framework that the leaders have pictured.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I think again, Jeff Bezos. I mean, I've been studying him for some time, and sort of Amazon for some time, and I mean, he has an interesting concept, a sort of a reverse veto concept, whereas in most organizations, if someone very junior has an idea, they would bring it to a management team that would review the idea, and it would be a sort of a majority vote, and if most people don't think it's a good idea, that idea dies immediately. What happens in Amazon is that they have a reverse veto. So if only one person thinks it's a good idea, so if everyone else says, no, I don't think this is a good idea, but one person does, it goes up to the next level for more senior people to have a look at it. Because what he realized was that actually good ideas were never making it up to the top of the tree, because they were getting throttled down below by politics or by different agendas or something. So the leadership was never getting to see the full spectrum of ideas that were coming from the sort of the people actually doing the job. They were only getting the ones that the management had decided were good enough. So he turned that on its head and had a sort of a reverse veto. And I think that was a really interesting concept, which says that this realization that just because your management team only knows the current reality doesn't mean that someone else who can see beyond that should have their ideas throttled at birth.
So that's the reason why Amazon has a lot of patents registered.
And the thing, the culture at Amazon is, Jeff Bezos said this right at the start in '99. He said, we're going to invest on the long term. We're going to try lots of things. We're going to put the customer at the center of our business. Most of the things we try will fail, and we'll have learned something through that failure. And we're going to give stock options to most of our people so that they see themselves as being entrepreneurs and part of the business rather than just an employee. Now, when I speak to people from Amazon in the past, I have done, and I ask them what their challenges are, given that they're probably one of the world's most innovative companies right now, the thing they tell me finally is that the challenge they have is that, taking intelligent people from other blue chip organizations, because they're useless to them. He said once they arrive, we can't deprogram them. They've been so programmed not to take risks and so programmed to play not to lose rather than to play not to win, that they become effectively useless. And he said, these are people from Harvard, Yale, good, smart people who've been through maybe the blue chip organizations or some of the top consultancies. He said, and they just can't be deprogrammed. So in a lot of cases, they've said, we're better off taking people that are young and fresh and bringing them in and molding them in the shape of what we want them to be.
You are using this quote quite often. Could you explain?
Yes, yeah, William Gibson spoke. Well, I think the future is already here. It's not evenly distributed. I think is a great quote. We said, look, most of the stuff when I present this, and I have been presenting, as you know, Martin, because you sat in the audience multiple times now since about 2012. Most of these technologies exist. They already exist, and they're being trialed and used by organizations like Amazon, like JD.com, like these sorts of companies. But the bounty from this technology is not being evenly distributed, because only some companies are at a position in their maturity that are able to take advantage of it. And the danger we have now, the danger in the sixth wave that I don't think really existed in any of the previous ones, is you have organizations like an Amazon that doesn't respect industry boundaries, that will be able to take their entrepreneurial spirit and their innovation mindset and these technologies and use them to attack any industry that it thinks has fat margins and the customer is not being best served. And that means that, the companies that are able to embrace the future, are able to use these technologies, can create whole new realities for themselves that those people who can't, either due to the organizational structures or cultures or whatever, are going to be left behind. So the concept, the opportunity is already here, but the opportunity is not evenly distributed.
So companies have to look more to other industries and to learn from what's happening over there, and then they might find some innovative applications that they can use for their own sake.
Yeah, I think really companies that limit themselves to only looking within their own industrial model are companies that aren't thinking big enough. And I don't think you necessarily just looking at other industries, but actually looking deeply at the customer and what the customer really is looking to achieve. So I always say, don't just try and help your customer succeed, maybe try and understand how you can help their customer succeed, because if you can help their customer be successful through your products and services, then your customer is likely to be more interested in it because you're helping them be successful. And that means that you can look at different industries and look at how they use technologies and think, well, can we use that? Can we reposition it? Can we steal it? Can we take that idea and redesign it? Because what we've got right now is a world where companies like Amazon are solving problems and creating whole new solutions that actually no people were asking them to do. They're so ahead of the game that they're actually solving problems that people weren't asking them to do. And what I mean by that is, if we take the Just Walk Out technology, for example, or the Amazon Echo, no one was asking for a cylinder in my kitchen that I talked to. There was no customer focus group that was saying, do you know what we need in our life? I need a device that I can talk to that sits in my kitchen and that I can tell it to play music. No one was saying that. No one was asking for a store where I didn't have to queue. There was, again, no focus group was coming up with that because they thought that was a reality that was always going to be there. Part of the shopping experience was I had to put stuff in a basket, take a basket to a till, take it out of my basket, put it across a scanner, put it back in my basket. That inconvenience was part and parcel of the shopping experience. And they couldn't imagine a reality where that wasn't the case. Amazon's now in a position where it's saying, that's an inconvenience for the customer, and actually there's a market opportunity there if we can take that away.
Yeah.
And that's where companies need to be.
Well, actually we should have time for Q&A, but that we have asked already a lot of questions myself and from the audience. So actually, we're running out of time. And basically, there will be another second version or second edition of this webinar. We addressed the first two quadrants, the trends and the impact. But basically, next we're going to talk about supply chain challenges now and in the near future. And in the end, we are getting to the point, how do you select the right supply chain solution with all this technology available? And then you can design your roadmap based on trends, impact, challenges, and solution. And what we are doing right now, Sean and I, we have workshop setups to make this happen. And this is what you see. This is a 3D environment. This is what we did 2 months ago with Guy Godin. We did a workshop in 3D with avatars. So basically, you don't need to get together with an actual workshop, and you can do post-it sessions in 3D with your avatars, what's happening on your screen right now. So basically, that's what we are going to do, and that we are going to pitch. So something to add to that, to this kind of workshop?
I think this is, we're in these times right now where, we begin to realize that this is not a temporary solution. There is going to be a new normal. I'd hate that term, but it's something that's probably going to be true, and it gives us the opportunity to innovate. And there's certainly, in the trials that we've done with this new experience, it allows people from around the world to come together in a virtual space and still do the things that we used to do physically through workshops in a really new and invited way. And I think that's the power of being in the upswing, is that we innovate. We innovate at the times when we can, and that means innovating the way we train and educate people.
I couldn't have imagined a year ago that I would do a workshop in this 3D environment with avatars walking around from people all over the world, on an island with different pavilions, and actually, doing exercises, just not in Microsoft Teams or Zoom, whatever, but in 3D environment where you can do even kind of Monopoly supply chain game in 3D. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined that.
Yeah, there are. That's a very famous person once said, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen.
and that period we're living right now. I see a lot of comments, but we're running out of time. So basically, I would like to thank the audience for listening, and we have a great turnout. Basically, coming Monday, we have the second part of the webinar. We could cram it in just 1 hour. So we will take another 45 minutes to explain how to address the supply chain challenges and how do you come up with the supply chain solutions, also based on your strategy. So then you can design your own roadmap for innovating into the future. So thank you for listening in. This has been recorded, and you will get the slides as PDF within 48 hours. You can download these with a link here you will get. Some final note to wrap up, Sean, from you?
No, just like, I mean, apologies, we overran a little bit, didn't allow Q&A. I mean, some great questions on here, and Len Pennant, you asked loads of great questions, but about the, certainly the Henry Ford point, I think was absolutely correct. If I asked customer what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. But I think we're at a point in time where doing nothing is not an option. And I think it's important that organisations now, sort of grasp the nettle and really take this opportunity to rethink, what it is and for whom they do it for, and to look at new ways of working, but actually make sure that they bring the organisation with them.
Yeah, all right. And so coming Monday, we have another webinar coming up. And then we explain how to choose the right technology for your company. So when should you apply blockchain and when not, and machine learning, AI, and so forth and so on. So basically, that's something we're gonna talk about coming Monday. So with that, I would like to end this webinar, and I would like to thank you all for listening. And bye-bye, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Bye.